Hello everyone and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name's Rhiannon and today I'm going to be talking about 12 books that I plan on reading throughout 2024. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys, I did plan on having this video up a lot sooner than this, but we have now made it into February and that just hasn't happened. I still wanted to get this up for you guys though, just because I do plan on reading these 12 books throughout the year and I thought it would be fun for you guys to know what I'm going to be prioritising and which books to expect in future TBRs and possible reading vlogs from me as well. Now, as I've mentioned, I've chosen to go for 12 books instead of 24. I know a lot of people have done 24 books that they want to read in 2024. However, you guys know I'm not the best at sticking to set TBRs all the time. I feel like they can sometimes take the joy out of reading, and if I want to mood read then I'm more restricted to what I can pick up. So I've decided to just focus on 12. I feel like that is going to be a much more achievable number for me, and I have actually read 1 or 2 books off of this list already, which I will mention when I get to them. So without further ado, let's dive on into the video and see what I plan on reading throughout the year. First up, we have The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. If you guys have been keeping up with my videos lately, you will know that this was on my January TBR, and I'm very happy to say that I have actually read this one. This was definitely a priority read for me going into this year. I've been saying for so long that I've been wanting to get into the Cosmere and read some more Brandon Sanderson books. However, I've just been putting it off. I think it's just a bit intimidating looking at all of the books that are out and knowing that you've got quite a long way to go before the payoff actually happens and things start to connect. However, now that I've read this one, I'm so glad to be back in the world. This is a reread for me, but I did want to prioritize it because I read this for the first time, I want to say in 2020, and then I never carried on with the rest of the books in the series. So that is going to change this year. I have the second book on my February TBR as well, so I am hoping to dive into that one soon. I feel like this is a placeholder for the series as a whole, and I've just noticed that the little gift note in here is sticking out. This was a present from Georgia, so thank you once again, Georgia, for this one. Now, this is the first book in Mistborn Era 1. Now, I have previously read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, which I absolutely loved. That was my first ever Brandon Sanderson novel, and then I went ahead and picked up this one. I feel like Elantris is more of a standalone though, so you can read that whenever. However, this is considered to be the first book in the Cosmere, and in this one we follow our main character Kelsier, who is trying to overthrow the Final Empire and the Lord Ruler in particular, because he is a Scar, and for 1,000 years the Scar have been oppressed, they have been treated worse than slaves, and Kelsier has finally had enough essentially. He is prepared to be the symbol of the Scar Rebellion, and so we see him as he prepares for that and as he goes around different Scar plantations inciting these riots essentially. Along the way he does recruit some interesting characters, including another character called Vin, and we see how this group works together to plot against the Final Empire and the Lord Ruler, who is essentially a godlike figure. Another really interesting aspect in this book is the magic system. Now, I wouldn't say that magic is the right word, to be honest with you guys, but essentially in this world people are able to ingest different metals, and based on the metal that you ingest you will gain a different ability. Now, Kelsier is an extremely rare case. He is what's known as a Mistborn, and he can actually ingest all 8 metals. It's a very rare ability, it's very sought after, and this of course gives him that extra edge that he needs in order to stand against the Final Empire, and so we see how that develops. We see different people use different abilities throughout this book, and we also see a character who had no knowledge about this stuff get thrown into it at the deep end and have to learn as much as they can in a very short period of time in order to help these band of characters. I hope I described that well to you guys. It's a very difficult book to describe because of course it's a new book in an adult high fantasy series. It is a dense book and I really don't want to give too much away. Just know that you will dive into this one and fall in love with it. I feel like it's such an accessible adult high fantasy book, and as I mentioned, I can't wait to read book 2 now, because this could technically be a standalone. From the way that this ends, I feel like I would be pretty satisfied with it as a standalone. However, with there being 2 more books, I'm excited to see where the story goes. I'm very intrigued, and hopefully it is one that I can get to in the next few weeks. The next book on my priority list is Crescent City, House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas, and technically House of Flame and Shadow as well, but I actually am currently reading this. I'm about halfway through, as you can see, and this one is mainly on the list because I've been putting this off ever since it came out. I read House of Earth and Blood, loved it, and I decided to reread it in anticipation for this book. However, I got about halfway through and put it down for some reason, and then I just never picked it back up again. But of course, with House of Flame and Shadow being released last month, it was about time that I revisited this series, especially because I really didn't want to be spoiled. However, I have since seen something on Instagram that has completely spoiled the ending of this book for me, so I'm low-key really mad about that, but it's my own fault for not picking it up sooner. So far, I am really enjoying this one. I'm up to page 494, so I've still got about 300 pages left. I feel like I've been slowly making my way through this for the past few weeks now, and I will be very glad to see it finished. Not because I'm not enjoying it, but because it is a slower paced book for me. I feel like it's more of a filler book, especially after the explosive ending of House of Earth and Blood. And even though I'm enjoying seeing our characters here and seeing how they've moved on from the events of that first book, I am expecting something more from this, and I'm just not getting it at the minute. I just want more action, which I feel like is a bit insensitive to say because these characters have been through so much, but for such a big book I need something else, you know, and at the minute I'm not getting it, but I'm hoping that the latter half will give me what I'm after. Of course, with this being the second book in a series, I can't tell you too much about this one in particular, but in the first book, House of Earth and Blood, we follow our main character, Bryce Quinlan, who is essentially a party girl. She is out almost every night with her best friend Danica and the pack of devils, and she is just living her life, getting wasted, and doing a lot of illegal things that she probably shouldn't be doing. However, Bryce's world is shattered when one day these friends are killed in a very brutal attack, and even though the perpetrator is seemingly behind bars, she just can't quite get over it. However, 2 years later, the person who is incarcerated for this crime manages to escape, and the murders start occurring once again, and so Bryce is actually put on the kind of task force in order to stop these murders and recapture the person responsible. And of course, along the way, she finds out a lot of difficult things. She also has to work alongside a fallen archangel named Hunt Athalar, who at the start of the novel she doesn't really seem to like. However, as we get further into the novel, we see them both start to connect with each other on a deeper level, and we see how their relationship progresses from there. Again, I don't want to say too much. I feel like a lot of you will know what Crescent City is about, but I feel like it's so hard not to spoil anything because that book is just insane. There's so much going on, and I feel like that's the difference here. I feel like I can't really say too much about this one because nothing has really happened so far, but of course it is one that's on this list. I am happy to be making my way through it, and hopefully I will be able to finish it in the next coming weeks. Next up is a book that I've been putting off for way too long, and that is Capturing the Devil by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the fourth and final book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. This has been on so many recent TBRs for me, and I just don't want to pick it up. I don't know why. I feel like I'm gonna absolutely love this book because it focuses on H.H. Holmes, who is a prolific serial killer who is responsible for the murder castle. And for those of you who don't know, I'm extremely interested in true crime, and especially the case of H.H. Holmes, because there's just so much in there that baffles me. So I feel like this would be my perfect type of book. However, I don't know if it's the fact that it's the last book in a series and I'm scared to complete the series that's putting me off, but I'm just not wanting to pick this book up. I also didn't love the third book as much as I loved the first two. I feel like a lot of decisions were made by certain characters that really didn't feel like things that they would do, and so I think I'm a bit apprehensive to see what actually happens in this one as well. But to quickly sum up what this book is about, we are following our main character, Audrey Rose, who is a woman living in 18th century London. Now, her mother did unfortunately pass away, and when that happened, Audrey Rose actually turned to science, and she traded in her embroidery needles for an autopsy scalpel and apprenticed under her uncle. Now, when a string of murders start occurring around London, she is drawn into the investigation because of her skill set and her need to figure out what is actually going on, and that is how she becomes entangled in the Jack the Ripper case. Now, of course, this is the fourth and final book, and we are following a different case. As I mentioned, Audrey Rose has made it to America, where I'm presuming she encounters H.H. Holmes in one way or another. And it just says here, Audrey Rose and Thomas begin their investigations only to find themselves facing a serial killer unlike any they've encountered before. Identifying him is one thing, but capturing him, especially within the infamous murder hotel he built as a confusing and terrifying torture lair, is another. Will Audrey Rose see her final mystery to its end, or will she fall prey to her most cunning adversary yet? again, I feel like this is going to be exactly my type of book. I've really enjoyed the first and second books in this series, so I don't know why I've been putting it off, but I have, and so that is why this book is on the list, and I'm really hoping that I do prioritize it very soon. Next up we have I Am Flame by Rebecca Yarros, and I'm happy to say that once again this is a book that I have read. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this was a bit of a struggle to get through for me, and I think it was for the same reasons as I mentioned with House of Sky and Breath. I absolutely loved Fourth Wing. It's one of my favourite books of all time, but that one was so fast-paced from the get-go that I was instantly immersed in the world, and I was just rooting for our characters so much. There were so many deadly things happening that kept me on the edge of my seat. And then in this one, because it's the second book, again it's more so a filler book, and because of that the pacing of this is so much slower. I feel like I wasn't half as invested in this one because I'm already familiar with the world and the characters and the setting as well, and even though it is more high stakes and there are a lot more things happening, I just wasn't drawn to this book, you guys, and it took me I think like 3 months to actually finish it. And the way I finished it is that I downloaded the audiobook and decided to listen to it rather than physically read it. Now, I will say that was the best course of action for me because I flew through it. I really enjoyed my experience listening to the audiobook, but to be honest, I feel like this is 2 books in one. It was extremely long for a second book, especially when nothing really happened, and then we get a part kind of halfway where things do start to pick up and the pacing changes, and then it's essentially like a different book. So as much as I loved Fourth Wing, I didn't quite love this one as much. I still really enjoyed it. I loved seeing our characters once again, and especially the dragons, but unfortunately this one was a bit of a letdown for me. I still gave it 4 stars. I still did enjoy it overall, but those first kind of 300-400 pages was such a slog for me. Now, for those of you who don't know what Fourth Wing is about, I honestly don't know how you could have avoided it until now, but essentially we follow our main character Violet Sorrengail, who has trained her whole life to become a scribe in the scribe quadrant. Now, when her father passes away, her mother decides that her child is definitely not going to be a scribe. She has to become a dragon rider, and so she puts Violet into the dragon riders quadrant. Now, this quadrant is as different from the scribe quadrant as it could be. It's a very tense, high stakes, life-threatening quadrant where every single trial is meant to kill off the weak. And so not only is she being thrown into an unfamiliar situation, she is also fearing for herself because she has a chronic illness, meaning that she has brittle bones, and the slightest nudge or scrape can really affect her and injure her. And so to be thrown into this deadly situation where people want to kill her, it's obviously not going to work out for the best. And so we see Violet as she struggles through these trials in order to get to Threshing, which is where she will hopefully bond a dragon. And not only is she the weakest candidate because of her condition, she is also a massive target because her mother is a general in the army, and she is actually responsible for a load of executions that happened to different rebels. And so the children of those rebels have been conscripted into the Dragon Riders quadrant, and they all want to get to her essentially, and so they feel like through targeting Violet and possibly killing Violet they can get revenge on the general. So she is on constant alert. She has no idea who she can trust, and as I mentioned, it's just so intense throughout the whole first book. I feel like I've talked way too much about this series now though, so I will be quiet, but I am glad to have finally finished this one, and I'm definitely looking forward to the next books in this series. I think this series is going to be 5 or 6 books, so we have a long way to go. This book ended on a bit of a cliffhanger as well, and a bit of a twist, so I will be not so patiently waiting to see what the hell that means. And even though I have already read this one, I did put it on this list in order to prioritize it because it was just taking me so long to get through. Next up is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, which is another one that I have actually read. I am smashing it so far with this list, you guys. As I mentioned, I was planning on filming it before this point, but it just didn't work out. And this is my most recent read. I read this for Polathon. It was my first book for Polathon, and while I did really enjoy it, I don't get the massive hype that surrounds this book. It was definitely an enjoyable story, but I feel like I just wanted more plot from it. It's a very character-driven book, which is completely fine, but you guys know me, I love the nitty-gritty details of a high fantasy book, and unfortunately this one wasn't that, but I can appreciate it for what it was, which was a polar fantasy following following a family in Russia who have grown up learning about different fairy tales. Now, most people don't actually believe in fairy tales, however they do still leave offerings out for different gods. But then we meet our main character Vasya, who is born into a somewhat well-off family, but she is not what anyone expected at all. She has a wild spirit inside of her which puts her apart from other people, and it just says here, she alone can see the house spirits that guard her home and sense the growing forces of dark magic in the woods. I'm actually not going to say too much more about this book because I feel like this is one you really do need to go into without knowing anything. That's the way I tackled it, and I'm actually really glad about that, because even though I've said that I wanted more from this book, I genuinely had no idea what to expect, and I really did like the route that it took. I just wish I knew that it was more of a slower paced, character driven novel diving in. I will say though, this book is so atmospheric. It is the perfect book to read during the winter months. The writing in here as well is just beautiful. I get why people love it so much because of that aspect of it, and I will be continuing on with books 2 and 3, which I am looking forward to. Again, I have no idea where the story is going to go from here because this wrapped up pretty nicely and it could be considered as a standalone, but this is another one that I am very happy to have ticked off of this list. And again, it's the kind of placeholder for the series as a whole because I do plan on reading those 2 books relatively soon, just because I don't want to leave it too long between the books, because when I do that I tend to forget what has actually gone on. The next book I have on this list is Caraval by Stephanie Garber, which is a book that I have actually read previously, but it was when this book first came out, which was in 2017. So it's been quite a few years since I actually picked this one up. I did listen to the second book on audio recently, but to be honest I couldn't remember anything that had gone on in this book, and so I really wasn't connecting to the characters and I really didn't care about the characters all that much. But with Stephanie Garber's newest trilogy being complete now, I have decided that I would like to reread Caraval and essentially read all of her books. From what I remember, I really did love Caraval when I first read it. It's a very magical book that definitely gave me Alice in Wonderland vibes, and for those of you who don't know, I'm a massive Disney lover. I love Alice in Wonderland, and I do actually have Alice on my mug here, which is completely coincidental, but it just proves to you guys how much I do actually love that story. And so to get that whimsy in a book such as this one was fantastic, and I'm really excited to dive back in and re-experience that magic as well. Now, I will read you the synopsis for this one just because I can't quite remember off the top of my head what it's about, but it just says here, Scarlet and Teller have never left the tiny isle of Trista, pining from afar for the wonder of Caraval, a once-a-year week-long performance where the audience participates in the show. Caraval is magic, mystery, adventure. When the sisters' long-awaited invitations finally arrive, it seems their dreams have come true. But no sooner have they arrived than Teller vanishes, kidnapped by the show's mastermind organizer, Legend. Scarlet has been told that everything that happens during Caraval is an elaborate performance, but she quickly becomes entangled in a dangerous game of love, magic, and heartbreak. And real or not, she must find Teller before the game is over and her sister disappears forever. That just sounds amazing. I can't wait to dive into this one, as I mentioned, and complete the trilogy so that I can dive into her next trilogy, which I've just heard amazing things about. So that is why this one is on the list. I really do need to prioritize it so that I can finally see how this trilogy wraps up and also dive into the next trilogy, as I mentioned. The next book I have on this list is The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. I picked up the first book, which is The Ruin of Kings, last year, I want to say, based off of Jade from JD Ray Reid's recommendation. Now, it took me quite a while to actually get into that book, but once I did, I flew through it and I really did enjoy it, and then I've just left it way too long between that book and this one, so I've decided to put it on this list in order to get me to prioritize it, and I am actually currently listening to the audiobook for this one. Now, I'm not that far in at all. I think I'm about an hour in, to be honest with you, which is nothing considering the size of this book, and I must say I have been a little bit confused by this. It does start off straight from where the previous book ended, but we are introduced to new characters from the get-go, and I feel like I couldn't quite wrap my head around that. So we'll see with this one. It is one that I'm slowly listening to. I will be listening to it on my commute to and from work. In the first book, we follow our main character Kirin, who has grown up in Kur's slums. One day though, he raids the wrong house and is marked by a demon, and this ultimately changes the course of his life forever. Because of the way events unfolded with this demon, Kirin's plight brings him to the attention of the royals, who claim him as their lost son and raise him as a prince. limits. But far from living the dream, Kirin is at his ruthless family's ambitions, and when he does try to escape, it just makes matters worse because everyone from gods and demons to dragons and mages want him as their pawn because he is at the centre of an age-long prophecy. Then again, maybe Kirin isn't the hero of this story because he's not destined to save the Empire, he is actually destined to destroy it. Now that's all I'm going to say about this series. I don't really know where it's going to go from here. Again, the first book was pretty explosive, there was a lot of stuff going on, and so far that's not what's happening in this one, but again, we are still reeling from the events of that first book and things need to fall into place once again in order to continue on with the story. So we'll see with this one. There are 3 books after this, I believe, in the series, so I'll have to make a decision after this one whether or not to carry on with the series. I have heard amazing things and I've heard that things come together in the next few books, so I probably will carry on, but I do think it depends on how I feel with this one, because if I'm not enjoying it then there's no point carrying on with the rest of the books in the series. The next book I would like to get to is another reread for me, and that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Again, this is a kind of placeholder for the series. I would just like to reread this first one and continue on with the rest of the books in the series because I read Red Rising, I want to say last year or maybe 2 years ago, and then I just didn't read the rest of the books in the series, and I don't know why because I loved this book so much, which I wasn't really expecting because I don't typically enjoy sci-fis, but this was right up my street. It is quite a brutal story, so maybe that's why I enjoyed it. But for this one it says, the Earth is dying. Darrow is a Red, a miner in the interior of Mars. His mission is to extract enough precious elements to one day tame the surface of the planet and allow humans to live on it. The Reds are humanity's last hope. Then Darrow discovers that everything he knows is a lie. Mars has been habitable and inhabited for generations by Golds, a class of people who look down on Reds as cheap labour to be exploited and worked to death without a second thought. Darrow, with the help of a mysterious group of rebels, disguises himself as a Gold and infiltrates their command school, intent on taking down the oppressors from the inside. But the command school is a battlefield, and Darrow isn't the only student with an agenda. It has been long enough now that I feel like I have forgotten quite a bit of what went on in this story. I remember a few key things, but it will definitely make sense for me to reread this one. I do want to just get immersed back in this world. I want to connect to the characters again because I know that there are characters in here that I really did love, and essentially I'd just like to see how the series continues and where the plot goes. I know that the most recent book in this series came out, I can't remember what it's called, I believe it's Lightbringer, and that just broke so many people, so I really want to see what the hype is about, starting off of course right back at the beginning with Red Rising, and hopefully, as I mentioned, I can read the next few books throughout the year so that I can finally get in on the hype and see what actually happens with our characters. Next up we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, which is a book that I started reading, I want to say in like 2018, and for some reason I put it down and I never picked it back up again. I've heard the most amazing things about this book, but I also know that it is a very hard-hitting novel and that it does deal with extremely difficult topics. There's one scene in particular in here that I know causes a lot of discussion because it is a very intense and horrible scene to read essentially, but I feel like it's going to be an important read. It's a series that I've just heard amazing things about, as I've said, and I really would like to finally see what this story is about, especially as I've now read Babel and Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I really did enjoy both of those books. I think I will read you the synopsis for this one. It's pretty long, but I feel like for us to get a sense of what it's actually about, I do need to read the synopsis. It says, opium runs through the heart of the Nakara Empire, a constant reminder of the war with the Federation of Mugen that brought it to the Empire's shores. A war that only ended thanks to 3 heroes, the Vipress, the Dragon Emperor, and the Gatekeeper, known as the Trifecta. They were legendary figures, each bestowed with godlike powers, who united the warlords of the Empire against the Federation. Decades have passed, the Trifecta is shattered, the Dragon Emperor is dead, the Gatekeeper is missing, and the Vipress alone sits on the throne at Singard. Peace reigns, yet the poppy remains. War orphan Fang Runin grew up without it. Her adopted family smuggles it throughout the Rooster province, making a living on the misfortune of those addicted to its smoke. But when Rin's parents force her into an arranged marriage, Rin refuses to accept her fate and fights her way to the prestigious military academy at Singard. There she will learn of drug-fueled shamanic powers thought to be myth, powers which might defeat the Federation during its 3rd invasion. But the cost of some powers is too great to pay, even if it means winning a war that threatens to destroy an entire nation. So this is going to be a war novel. I know that in Babel we focused a lot lot on the opium that was imported into China and third world countries and the devastation that it wrought as a result of that, and so I feel like it's going to be very poignant to read in this one, and it's going to show us just how deep it affected these countries. So I don't want to say that I'm excited to read this trilogy because of the subject matter, but I do think that this is one that I will personally really enjoy, and again I just can't wait to see what the hype is about and experience the story for myself. Next up we have a book that I'm shocked to say I haven't read yet, and that is Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. This is Cassandra Clare's adult fantasy debut, and it's her first novel that is completely separate to the Shadowhunter books. All I know about this one is that we follow our main character Kel, who is set to become the prince's bodyguard known as Swordcatcher. Now that means that essentially he would give his life in order to save the prince, and that makes them as close as brothers. But after a failed assassination attempt brings Kel closer to another one of our main characters, who is Lynn, they are drawn into the web of the mysterious Ragpicker King, ruler of Castellane's underworld. And then it just says here, he offers each of them what they want most, but as Lynn and Kel sink deeper into his world, they uncover an extraordinary conspiracy. As long-kept secrets unravel, they must ask themselves, can forbidden love bring down a kingdom? And will their discoveries plunge their nation into war and the world into chaos? I feel like I've been putting this off because I'm just so scared to dive into this one, you guys. Cassandra Clare is a favourite author of mine. I have all of the Shadowhunter books, and it's just a series that has a special place in my heart. It's the series that got me into the book community and booktube in particular, and so I just owe a lot to that series, and I'm not sure how to feel about this one. I've heard so many mixed reviews, so that's definitely not helping, but it's one that I would like to get to soon, and that is why I put it on this list, because I really do need to read it this year, and if it's on the list, it has to get read. The same goes for this beast of a book, which is Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. I got this when it first came out, I want to say 2-3 years ago, and I just haven't read it. I loved the Nevernight trilogy by Jay Kristoff. I know that recently he seems to be more problematic, which is definitely a reason that I've strayed away from this book, but so many people rave about this. My stepdad recently read this and loved it as well, and because I own it, because I have liked Jay Kristoff's writing in the past, I do want to give this a shot. I also feel like it's going to be really interesting because we do follow vampires, if you couldn't tell, and the second book is being released later on this year, so I feel like it's time to give it a go and see whether I want to continue on with the series. Again, I will read you the synopsis for this one. I do apologise, but I genuinely don't know too much about it. It says, it's been 27 long years since the last sunrise. For nearly 3 decades, vampires have waged war against humanity, building their eternal empire even as they tear down our own. Now, only a few tiny sparks of light endure in a sea of darkness. Gabriel de Leon, half man, half monster, and last remaining Silver Saint, a sworn brother of the Holy Silver Order dedicated to defending the realm from creatures of the night, is all that stands between the world and its end. Now imprisoned by the very monsters he vowed to destroy, the last Silver Saint is forced to tell his story. A story of legendary battles and forbidden love, of faith lost and friendships won, of the wars of the blood and the forever king, and the quest for humanity's last remaining hope, the Holy Grail. I am definitely scared by the size of this book. It's about 720 pages, I want to say, which is insane, and because it's a new book in a high fantasy series, I know it's going to be quite a dense read, at least to start with, so I definitely need to be in the right headspace for this one. I am not sure when I will get to it. Maybe it's better to just read it now and get it out of the way, I don't know, but I do think I need to set aside a chunk of time in order to actually read this one, because it is going to take a lot more brain power, and it is just going to take a lot more time in general because of the size of it. And we have finally made it to the last book on this list, you guys, which is the Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This is on this list because I have all the books that are out of this series so far, and I haven't read a single one. I've been pre-ordering them every year. I've got the lovely hardback editions of all of them, and they have just been sat on my shelves ever since I have received them. Again, I think I'm just really scared by the love that this series has, and it just intimidates me. I feel like I'm just scared that I'm not going to enjoy it, and that's why I've put it off, because this is such a beloved series. It's a murder mystery, which you guys know is one of my favourite genres, but for some reason I've just been scared to pick this one up essentially, so I've put it on this list to kind of force myself to pick it up. And again, I don't know when I will get to it, but hopefully it will be soon, because I would like to read all 4 books if I could this year, which I don't know if it's achievable because I'm just staring at them now and they do seem to get bigger and bigger, but I definitely want to see what the hype is about with this series. I know that the last book was quite sad as well, and I just want to read it, experience it, and figure out why everyone loves this this so much. For this one it says, in a peaceful retirement village, 4 unlikely friends meet up once a week to investigate unsolved murders. But when a brutal killing takes place on their very doorstep, the Thursday Murder Club find themselves in the middle of their first live case. Elizabeth, Joyce, Ibrahim and Ron might be pushing 80, but they still have a few tricks up their sleeves. Can our unorthodox but brilliant gang catch the killer before it's too late? I feel like this is just going to be exactly my type of book. It's going to be a murder mystery with an older cast of characters, which, for those of you who don't know, I have read all of the Miss Marple books and absolutely love them. I feel like she is such a good detective, and because she is an older character, she's often overlooked, so I will love to see how that's tackled in this series. And I also feel like this is going to be a humorous type of book as well, because of the age of our characters and the setting and just the vibe I get from the synopsis. So there we have it, guys. These are all of the books that I plan on prioritizing in 2024. Not gonna lie, it's extremely heavy. I honestly don't know how I am holding it up for so long, so I am just gonna pop it down. But please do let me know your spoiler-free thoughts on any of these books down below, and please do let me know which books you think I should prioritize first. Just because you guys know I'm indecisive, and if you say that you enjoyed a book, then it's gonna make me more likely to pick it up. So please go ahead and leave me some thoughts down below. If you have made it this far through into the video, please go ahead and comment a stack of books as an emoji. I know I say it all the time, but seeing you guys comment the emoji of the video truly does mean the world to me. It blows me away that you guys watch these all the way through, especially the longer ones such as this one. So if you don't have anything in particular that you would like to say, but you would like to let me know that you're still here, please go ahead and comment that now. As well as that, please don't forget to click the like button if you like this video and the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content from me. But that is it from me today, guys. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you soon in my next video. Goodbye!